Okay, first of all, very good morning, and thanks for everyone joining. And as usual, my name is Adam. And what is the agenda for today or for this particular topic? Now, in DevOps, we have a lot of tools like Terraform, Kubernetes, but typically, when we want a machine, right? We use tools like Terraform or a concept like infrastructure as a code, and we create a machine. So this is where infrastructure as a code mainly focuses only on creating a machine, or a tool like Terraform connects to any of the cloud and creates the machine. But after that, we need to configure that machine depending on our specific use case, right? So that way, Ansible is one of the popular tools which most of us use because of various reasons, like it's open source and it's easy to learn and easy to adapt. So being that, now again, for those people who are not much familiar about Ansible, think now you create a machine using Terraform, but after that, whatever you want to install or configure that machine, you need to use a tool like Ansible. So that way, as a DevOps or SRE engineer on a day-to-day activity or on a frequent uh, periodic method, you definitely use Ansible to configure the machines. Now, in that, let's take one example or a use case. So, assume you have a couple of machines in your production, and you want to do a patching, that is OS patching, or you want to do a OS upgrade very frequently. It could be like once in a month or once in a couple of weeks, depending on your organization. So, how do we use a tool like Ansible for upgrading production? Right? So that's the whole agenda that I wanted to cover today. So it's not just that, oh, you have a tool and you just run some commands from a particular machine, especially if you're going to apply for a position where you have a relevant experience in which you say, I have worked in production or production equivalent servers, then there are some best approaches or best practices only through which you will be able to run it. So one such method is, how do we run Ansible on production? So that's the kind of agenda what I wanted to talk. Now, before we get started, and if this is the first time that you're here, or if you haven't subscribed to the channel, it's a humble request to please like and subscribe the channel. And there's plenty of videos that's already there, and this is something which always keeps encouraging us to do more videos. And not only that, please do comment in case if there is any specific topics that you would like to see in the future. All right. With that, please ensure that you subscribe to the channel. So, coming back to the topic, how do we run Ansible on a bunch of production machines, right? Now, there are a lot of best practices, but I would like to pick some of the very important topics or the best practices, which will be very useful for you when you talk to someone in the interview, or if you are given a task to do some patching or some upgrade on a production machine using Ansible. So, the first step, what I want you to remember is, especially when you're using tool like Ansible, you need a particular user account as whom the Ansible itself will be executed. Okay. So what we have to make sure is not to use the same user for all the accounts. Because while you're practicing or where you're learning, no one would just tell you, because all I will tell, hey, there's a production server, let's go there and run. But you need to be clear when you're calling your Ansible controller and executing the Ansible playbooks for each environment or for each machines, like for your dev or QA or for your staging and production, do not use same user account. So what you have to do for this, when you're setting up your Ansible, we need to make sure we have different user accounts, that is the Linux user account. So as soon as you go to a machine, you will be logging as a user called Ubuntu or a root, right? So similar to that, ensure for each of the servers in the respective environment, you have different user account. For example, I can say for WezvaTech, I can have a WezvaTech dev user, QA user, production user. Okay. There's a lot of background noise. Arjun, can you please mute everyone? Okay, just give me. I'm sorry. This is the problem. Okay, now let me just repeat what I was saying so that anyway we are recording, right? So bear with me for another 2 minutes. I'll repeat the scene. So one of the best practice while we are using Ansible is to have separate user accounts, which means when you are running Ansible from a controller or a particular server, we need to have a user as whom we run, because when you connect to a machine, you connect as Ubuntu or as Adam or as root, and then you run whatever the commands you want, right? The same way when you run Ansible, what we have to make sure for each of the servers in a specific environment, create separate user. Okay. For example, for WezvaTech, I can create a user called dev user, so that if I want Ansible to run against this machine, I should be executing the Ansible using that particular user. Same way, for each of the servers, you should have a specific user created. So this way, it ensures that by mistake also, if you try to run a playbook on production as a different user, you will not be allowed to execute. Okay. Now, along with it, it's also another best practice. What you can do is whenever we say Ansible, which internally does a SSH, rather than hard coding the username and password, you can also try to create a passwordless SSH in which you try to have different public keys for each of this machine. So this way, when you run Ansible, what you need to do is you specifically call the playbook, and while you're running, you also say as which user you want to run. Okay, so this makes sure that executing Ansible in a secure way. Okay, now along with it, what we also have to do is have separate configuration files, that is separate host or inventory file. So if I want to connect to dev servers, I will create a separate inventory file in which I will list only the dev servers or QA servers or prod servers. So this also ensures that by mistake you do not run your playbook on production. Now how? Let me just show you. Now for this quick demo, I already have a bunch of machines. So you can see I have a production controller and I have 4 target nodes. So let me connect to this. Now this is my Ansible controller and I have Ansible already. Now in this machine, I've already pre-populated some of the files. So this is my sample playbook. However, you can see there is 3 separate inventory files. Okay. So what these files will contain? Now, whatever is your dev machines or the machines in your dev environment, you can put it as a separate group. Same way, if you want to run your Ansible playbook against a group of QA machines, then put that into a separate inventory file. So this is how make sure you also have separate inventory file in which it lists the machine for QA or production or dev. And when you're running Ansible, you also have to tell as which user and choose against which machine. Now, a simple example that I'm saying, okay, for throughout this session, I would be using this sample playbook. So that let me just explain. So what I'm saying here is a sample playbook which connects to a group of machine called demo. And in that, it is basically going to run two tasks. Okay. So all I'm doing in this task is give a pause or a sleep of 5 seconds so that you see task one takes 5 seconds to complete and then comes to task two. Okay. Now, as the best practice that I was saying, so same playbook, if I want to run against different environment and different machines, you need to use the respective user and the inventory file. So how do we do it? So coming back, so when you call your Ansible playbook, you will say Ansible playbook, the name of the playbook, followed by the inventory. So this becomes a dynamic inventory. So it will run the playbook only against the machines that I have put in this inventory file. And while I'm running it, I'm also going to run it as a specific user called dev user. So this way, you call the playbook, which is the same, and you run against a group of dev machines, and for that you use the user called dev. Again, this is my assumption where I have created a user called dev. Now according to your need, you can create different users. Now how do we run? Okay. Now again, I'm just giving a hyphen check. So this is not to run exactly, but just to evaluate what it is going to do. So this is more like a syntax check, and I'm not actually running. So what is happening? So Ansible is trying to connect to all the machines, basically my dev machines, and as which user? Called dev user. Okay. Same way, if I want to run the playbook against my QA machines, then I should be saying the inventory file as QA and the username as whichever the respective QA user. You see the same playbook, you're now running it against the QA machines and as a QA user. And similar to that, if I want to run it against production, then I will specify my production inventory and the user which has access to the production machine. Okay. So again, it specifically connects to my production servers as the user called prod or prod user. So this ensures you are running Ansible against a specific group of machines as a specific user. Okay. So that's one of the things that you need to remember. So do not just blindly say I run Ansible directly, but you specify which inventory file and which user. Now, what's the second best practice? Always use version controlling. Now, just similar like how we store our Docker file, Kubernetes files, or Jenkins file, or even your Terraform file, we should also store our Ansible code, that is your playbook or roles, in a Git repository, which could be like GitHub or GitLab or anything similar. But remember, as a DevOps engineer, you will be doing two things, especially when we say Ansible. One, you develop Ansible playbook or you execute the Ansible playbook, or you develop Ansible role and execute Ansible role. Now, just few seconds before whatever I was doing is executing an developed playbook or a role. But as a DevOps engineer or an SRE engineer, if you will also be responsible for developing those Ansible playbook or the code to do some configuration, then you need to strictly follow the concept of storing your actual code into a version controlling system. Okay. Now, in that, one more point that you need to know is, okay, now I want to store all my Ansible playbook, for example, let's say into GitLab. But you have to ensure that there is a branching strategy. Now, it doesn't have to be a complex strategy as a product, but a simple strategy where you have a separate branch for your development and a separate branch for your execution. Now that is what I'm calling it as prod. So prod means production grade code. So whenever I'm running on any environment, I should take the production grade code, then I should execute. But while I'm developing, I should be developing it against the dev branch. So this is when, in real time, you will not most of the time use one Ansible controller to execute it against different environments. Okay, so you will first have a separate Ansible controller machine which is only used for your development work. So now, if your responsibility is to create a playbook for some OS patching, let's say, so what you will do is first go to the development machine, and here you clone your particular project, and you then check out to a particular branch, which is the dev branch, because this is the branch where you develop the code, test, break, and check whether it is proper. Now, once you develop the code, you should also do a small test, which could be like a smoke test or a sanity test, where you again run your Ansible and check whether the code is working fine or not. And that's exactly when what you will be doing is running your Ansible using a specific inventory file. So the option that I showed you some time back, right? And against a user called dev. So you will not be kind of having one machine from which you will be running against all the environments. Okay, so most of the time, for security perspective, it's good to have a separate dev machine. So remember, you run the command like Ansible playbook, and you say -i the list of servers or the inventory which has dev machines, and you also say become user as a dev user. So that's what you do for your development. Now once your code is fine and you have tested everything, then you do the commit and push the code back to the dev branch. Then what happens? Now, within the team, someone has to review the code. It could be your colleagues, or it could be a senior, or even sometimes your manager can review the code. So once the code is reviewed and certified that, okay, whatever the code that you have developed in Ansible, it's good for using, then we will merge the code from your dev branch to the final branch, which could be a prod branch or a main branch. Okay. So now, this way, one day-to-day activity, what you will be doing is you will be developing new files or new YAML files for playbook, or modify the existing YAML file or rules. So that is one activity. So for that, go to the development Ansible machine and run the same playbook, but while you run it against inventory for dev and a user called dev. So then finally, when you want to actually run your Ansible to do some patching or OS update using the same playbook for QA machines or production, then we will have a separate Ansible production controller, because from this machine you will be able to only SSH to a particular production machines or a QA machines. Whereas if someone tries to do a SSH or run Ansible from the development machine by passing a production server, it will also fail. So that's the security wise. So now, if you are periodically running Ansible to update, let's say, your production server, then go to the production controller and do the git clone. But this time you should be checking out to the final branch, which is the main branch or the production branch. Again, remember, production branch means production grade code. So this is the actual code which I can run for QA, staging, or production. So anytime that you want to run Ansible, you will be running the same playbook, but you will say which inventory to take and which username to pick up. So this is how, whatever the commands that I was just trying to show you just some time back, what you will do here is you execute. So basically, just to show you, so you run this from the dev machine. The same way, suppose if you have a single machine for your QA and prod, then you will be running these two on your production controller. Okay. So that's the typical difference. Now, in some companies, they'll just have a single machine and they will run. But always remember, as a best practice, have a development machine and run your same playbook, develop, test, and only when things are fine, you commit the code and push the code to your Git repo. Okay, and then you merge the code, and whenever you want to run, your actual execution will be use the specific inventory and the user. Okay, so this is another best practice that you need to remember. Okay, now so far this might be like, hey, I know all those things, what's the big difference? But let me also tell you one more important thing which people do not remember to do. All right, now, when I have a playbook and I know that if I have to run it in production, I have to go to a particular production controller machine, and in that I will choose the production inventory and production user. Okay, but see how Ansible behaves. Now, for this, let us take a use case. Now, assume I have a bunch of 5 or 6 machines in a inventory and in an inventory group. Okay. And the same example that I showed you, I have 2 tasks. When you run Ansible, what will Ansible do? Ansible, okay, if you recall your basics, Ansible picks one task at a time and runs all the machines that it is there in the group or in the inventory what you have given, and it executes them in parallel. So if we have 2 tasks, it will first take the first task and run all the 5 or 6 machines that you have in the group together, which means the task whatever that you have given will be executed on all the machines in the group at the same time in parallel. Okay, once all of this is completed, only then it will go to task 2, and once again in the task 2 it picks up all the servers to run in parallel. Okay, so this is the default behavior of Ansible, which is not good for production. Why? We will see. Now, first, let me show you how this runs. I'll go back my machine. Okay, again, I'll show you. So I have just a simple 2 tasks. Now, let's say I want to run it on my production. So how should I run? First thing, you should be going to your production controller, check out the branch, get the code from the production or main branch. And now while I run, let's assume I'll just run this. Okay. Now I'll run this time without the check, so which will actually execute. Now, just for keeping it as simple, I'm just reducing all these so that you will just exactly see what it is happening. Okay. So assume it is running as production user. So I'm saying go to my production machines and run this playbook. Okay. Watch what is happening. It's first picking up task 1. And in the task 1, it will run all the machines that we have in parallel. Okay, but sometimes there could be 1 or 2 servers which might be delaying that execution. That is okay, but the point here is when it takes a task, it runs all the tasks in parallel, and when all the machines are completed, it will go to the next task. Okay, I'll rerun and I'll show you. Now, for this example, in my inventory, I have 6 servers. Okay, and watch how by default Ansible runs. Okay, you can see it picked up all the machines, and only when it completes, it goes to the second task, and then it again runs all the machines together. Okay, now what's the problem in this? Now, usually people don't think or realize that, oh, I run everything, but everything is running in parallel. Now, let's say you are running Ansible and Ansible is doing some update on all the machines in parallel. If something goes wrong, your Ansible update or the OS update got corrupted, then what will happen? all the machines in your production at the same time is going to get corrupted, and that is something which is not at all acceptable, right? Because in production, if all the machines goes down, then nothing will work. So whenever we run Ansible in production, we need to kind of have some strategy. Okay. Now this strategy depends on again our requirement. Now, apart from the default, there are two types of strategies which Ansible gives. Now we need to use it depending on how do I want to control my production. Okay. So what are those two? Now, the second or the actual first strategy that I want to talk about is fork method. So what is fork method? So fork method is where, okay, so you had this 6 machines in one group. If you do not want Ansible to run all the 6 servers or the 5 servers in parallel for the task one, instead, what you want is you want Ansible to first run task one, and in the task one, you want first only 5 or 3 or 2, how many servers you want to run, and then take the next set of servers to run. Now, for this example, let's say I have 5 servers, and out of 5 servers, what I want is Ansible to run 3 servers in parallel at a time. So that is what we call it as fork. So now, when you run the playbook, when Ansible takes up the first task, depending on what fork value you have given. Now I have given 3. So what will Ansible do? It will first take only 3 machines. Again, randomly it will pick 3 machines from the group what you have given, and it will run all the 3 in parallel. And then once it is completed, for the next execution for the same task, we still have left with another 2 or 3 machines. It will take that and it will run in parallel. So this way, only when all the machines has been completed for task one, it will go to task two. But once again, when you say task 2, instead of running all the machines in parallel, what you have given as fork 3, then it will try to run only 3 machines in parallel. But I have to complete like this for all the remaining machines, right? So the next time for the same task 2, it will pick up the next remaining 2 or 3 machines. Again, it will pick 3 machines, but overall, if I have only 5 machines, so it will just take the remaining 2. So this way, by specifying fork, you can control for each task how many machines you want to run in parallel at a time, so that it doesn't take all the machines together. Okay. Now let's watch this. So the same playbook where we had 6 machines and we saw that it was trying to run all of them in parallel. Now I can choose the fork. Now to choose the fork, what you can do, you can pass an option called -f and the number. Now the same example, watch what happens if I say fork as 3. And in our example, my inventory has 6 machines. So you should see for task 1, it will first take 3 machines in one group, run, and then the same task, it will be running the remaining 3 machines. So watch carefully. Okay, task 1, but wait for it to complete. You can see it only picked 3 machines. Then it goes for the next 3 machines that we have. Okay. And now once it's completed, it goes to task 2. And again in task 2, it takes up only 3 machines. Okay. So this is how many machines that it has to run in parallel at a time for a task is what we call it as fork. Now the same example, now let's say in my production, I don't want to run 3. Let me control by running only 2. So if I say fork is 2, watch what happens. So task 1, it picks up only 2 machines. See, then same task remaining next set in which it will take the next 2 machines. Then again, I still have 2 more machines, so one more execution in which next 2 machines. Okay. So only when all of that is completed, it's going to task 2. and once again it picks up two machines at a time. Okay, so that's exactly what fork does. So for a task, how many machines you want to run in parallel? Okay. Now, this is one method, which is called as parallel method. But there is one more strategy that we can use, which is what we call it as batch method. Okay. Or technically in Ansible, we call it a serial method. Okay. Now this is funny, just to compare. So it's like, assume there is a marriage and there is a lunch in the marriage, or lunch or dinner, whatever you want. Now, if the hall for the food, right, can accommodate only 50 people, but let's say the crowd that has come to the marriage is 300 people, what will happen? Once you open, everybody cannot sit. So you will apply some kind of strategy, right? So you will say, okay, let me allow only first 50, and for that first 50 I will serve all the 3 course or 7 course meal, whatever you have prepared, right? Starters, the main course, and then desserts. And once they finish all the courses of the meal, then you send them outside and then invite the next set of 50 people or whatever you can accommodate, and they will go through all the 3 meal or 7 meal course, and then they will be stepping out, and then the next set of 50 people will come. Correct? The same concept. Now in fork, even though you control for one task how many machines you are running in parallel, still what happens if something goes wrong? If it goes to the second set of machine, you are still picking up the entire 6 machines or all the machines that you have in your inventory. So there could be high chances if something goes wrong, your production will be down. So instead, using the serial method, what you can do, you can run the entire playbook in a controlled fashion. So instead of taking up all the machines together and then for each task you are running in parallel, right? Instead, in a serial method, you decide how many machines from the inventory file should be picked up at a time, like a batch, to run all the tasks, and then take the second batch. The example, like exactly like the marriage hall scene that I said. So now take the same example, assume that I have 5 machines, and this time I want to run only 3 machines at a time. Okay, and fork, I'm not giving anything, which means how many ever machines you take for a task, it can run everything in parallel. So what will happen now? Out of 5 machines, first Ansible will pick up only 3 machines. So we call it as first play, which means the entire execution will be executed 2 times, like 2 plays. So for the first play, task one, how many machines? 3 machines. Okay, and all the 3 machines can run in parallel because we have not given any fork. Then task two, only the first 3 machines is allowed, just like the marriage scene where you serve the starters, main course, and the desserts, and then send them off. Now, once this 3 servers is completed, then you take the next set of machines. So out of 5, if you have taken 3, now I can allow the next 3, but if you have only 2, then all the 2 can be taken. So that's where in the next execution, task 1, the remaining 2 servers will run in parallel. Okay? And task 2, the remaining 2. So this way, for any reason, when you are running, if the first 3 servers get hung or doesn't get updated properly or some issue, you still have the other 2 servers through which your production can be still continued. So this is how we need to decide. Okay? Now let me show you how this happens. Now going back to the same example, okay, it just got disconnected. Let me connect back. Now, if you want to run your playbook in a serial method, then you need to add a keyword called serial, and you give a name, sorry, a number. So let's say I will give serial 3. Okay. So watch the same execution, Ansible playbook, my YAML file, and my inventory. So task 1, it will take only 3 machines now. Okay. And task 2, it will go ahead with 3 machines. And then it's repeating the same task by executing the remaining machine. So this way you have the control. Now my inventory has 6 machines, so that's the reason it's taking the remaining 3. Okay. So depending on your need, you can allow. So for example, let me take it as 2. So totally your 6 machines, but at a time the entire playbook has to be executed only with 2 machines. So you can see 3 times it will run. So first time 2 machines. So task 1 2 machine, task 2 2 machines. Then the same playbook again it will run for the remaining 2 machines, task 1 and task 2. And then the third time it will take up the remaining last 2 machines. So task 1, task 2. So that's what you could see, 3 times it's executing. Okay. Now, you can also control both the serial and the fork together. So which means, okay, at a time, how many machine I want to run, and in that, when my task is running, how many machines do you want to run in parallel? Okay. Now, the same example here, I have said serial is 2, which means at a time for a playbook, it should run 2 machines. But just to show you, I want to run only 1 machine at a time. So what I can do now, the same, I can just say fork as 1. Now, since the existing I'm just modifying. So at a time, when it takes 2 machines, but for each task, only 1 machine it will run in parallel. So that is how serial is to tell the entire playbook if you want to run how many machines you have to take at a time. Whereas fork, when a task is executed, whatever the machines you have, how many machines in parallel it has to run. So this is where now you will see out of 2 machines for one playbook execution, each task will be executed 1 machine at a time. So this way, if there is any issues, you can stop your playbook then and there, and you can fix and ensure your production doesn't get affected. Okay. So ensure and remember this, because blindly running any tool or Ansible on production is not easy. You need to have an understanding on how do we control. But unfortunately, Ansible doesn't have something called as rollback. Okay. So that is where whatever you are doing in production using Ansible, whether it's a production server upgrade or changing the configuration, or you're doing a OS patching, it's very much necessary for you to remember all the best practices, and with that remember what strategies that you want to use. That is, are you going to use something like only serial method, or you can use the serial and fork method. All right. Now, many of the candidates who come to us have one common question, and which is where this is the opportunity I would like to give you, because what you have seen, these are some of the best practices usually we teach our candidates so that you make sure you get into your dream job. But everyone are not same, and the same shoe doesn't fit everyone, right? Now broadly, those candidates or you who are willing to change your career into DevOps or SRE or the latest what we have will be divided into 2 groups. So one, I call them as beginners or experienced. So who are beginners? Now let's say it doesn't matter whether you are a fresher or an experienced person or someone with a career gap. You are completely new to DevOps and you're looking to transition your career or start your IT job with DevOps as the first experience with some gap. So what you expect is you want to learn all the tools and concepts in DevOps or SRE from basics to advanced. So that's the first thing you have to do. So that's where you have to learn tools like, okay, what is Ansible? What is Terraform? What is Docker? What is Kubernetes? What are the commands and syntax? How do you develop the code for that? You have to first learn it. Then you have to start implementing the projects so that in real time how you will be working. Because if you have to showcase that you have already worked for at least 4 years or 5+ years of relevant experience, then for that you need to talk in terms of the projects. Correct? So this is where after you learn your tools, you will go ahead with implementing the projects and then show that in your resume or profile and say that this is how I have an overall of 4 or 5 years of experience or how much ever that you're looking at. But on the other side, there are a lot of people where you are already working in DevOps or SRE and you are already familiar with most of the tools that you have used in the company. But what happens due to the organization structure, you will be having limited understanding and knowledge on the tools, and you most of the time you might be just doing only the operations. Okay, so this is where you are familiar with the tools, you know what is the concepts, but you do not know how in real time that will work because your team will be only focusing on Jenkins or Docker or Kubernetes or something like system administration or production support, but not end to end. And that's where what you need is to have more hands-on on how in real world projects will be done so that you can relate that to your experience. And not only that, you might also be someone who has been trained already where you know all the concepts and the basics of all the tool, but you are lagging in understanding how do you use this in production. So this is where your requirement is not to learn the tools from scratch because you already know. You should directly jump in into getting hands on how in a real world or a live project should be done and use that to showcase 4 years or 5 years or whatever is your relevant experience. Now, with these kind of requirements coming to us, so this is where what we wanted to do is come up with two separate programs to benefit each of you in a separate way. So exactly this is when we have a program called DevOps Ninjas program. Now, this is pretty much suitable for someone who is completely new to DevOps. So you do not know anything about the tools and concepts. So then try to join this where you will get all the tools and concepts which is latest in the DevOps from the basics to advanced, learn all the concepts and the best practices, and then start implementing a project, not just project, multiple projects, and make sure that with that project experience and what you have learned, start attending the interview so that you will be able to showcase 3 or 4 or 5 years of relevant experience. But if you're someone who is already worked in DevOps and or trained, and what you're looking at or what you're lagging is the real-time experience, that is the projects which you want to showcase. And that's when we bring in a new program called the DevOps Projects Bootcamp. And it's a 100% only project-oriented program where we are not going to talk about the basic concepts of the tool because that is what you already know. So what we will do, we will jump in directly into the live projects, understand what is the project, how to take the project, what will be the best practices that you have to run, and what will be the different scenarios that you will get and get hands on and implement. So this way, your focus is completely onto how to do the live DevOps project, or as a DevOps or SRG engineer, what are the different areas that you will be doing projects. So do projects on Terraform, Ansible, Docker, Kubernetes, monitoring, or DevSecOps or SRE, and take this as an experience and you can show a relevant of 4 or 5 years. So this way, the chances of you getting into a job are completely high, right? And that's where we always have close to 98% of the success rate. So instead of wasting time, I mean, I won't call it as wasting time, but instead of putting your effort on learning from basics again, if you're already familiar, then start jumping into the projects and make sure you directly start doing live hands-on project and take that and update your profile and showcase that this is what you have been doing in your company in the last 4 years or 5 years minimum, and start applying for your dream job. Okay. So, with that, once again, I'd like to thank you for the time. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, please make sure that you like and provide a subscribe. And for any comments or any new topics that you want, most welcome, so that we would be able to come up with some new webinars with some more productive informations for you. Right. So, with that, I once again thanks everyone, and thanks for joining. But again, let me open up for any questions that you have now. Any questions? I'm sorry, let me bring up the questions. Just give me 1 minute. Let me just allow you guys to talk. Yep. Any questions?
Hi, Adam. You able to hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. So, Adam, I only have a questions regarding this DevOps project bootcamp.
Mm-hmm.
When you say this project to build, right? It is a good training, I would say, because you would get a hands-on experience. And also I wanted to know how much in percentage these projects really help us to work on real time, and you go and build things right in the organization level. Assume you have a Jenkins pipeline. You wanted to build from a scratch. If I do a project here, how much that is really helpful in the designing a project in the organization level. So that solution and design, right? Just wanted to understand how close it is these projects compared to a real time projects in which is in organization.
Okay. Now, that's a very good question, because the first thing why we wanted to come up with this, because most of the time so far what we were doing is only the DevOps ninjas program or something, where we were teaching everything from scratch and then we were doing some projects. But with the market expecting more and more, and with people who might be already trained or you already working, and you want to quickly get into that, right? And you have more focus into more real time and live. So that's where the projects whatever that we wanted to take is once again handpicked. So these are not something which we are just trying to cook up something, and this is specifically we. I mean, I say we. I personally have been working into this for a bunch of time, and whatever the scenarios that I have gone through and what I have done recently is what we're going to convert it into project. So one point is you take this, and when you talk, it's a real world scenario where people have already done for some kind of customer. Second, the scenarios what we take will be close enough to production, and which is what I call it as live. Now let me tell you, it's no false thing by saying that okay, this is what exactly you will do, but taking up a use case scenario, we will try to mimic on what and all challenges that you might face, and what and all were the requirements that you had to fulfill. So in that way, there will be lot of informative things which you might have not even looked at in your current place, because your client might not need. So that is the level where we will try to give you many more things. Now, taking this might not be 100% the requirement for different client, but you are going to give it in such a way that whether the client needs, that's already there, or you are also talking about something futuristic that you did for another client which the client might take. Correct. Now I will compare it with my usual dialogue, is like a buffet. Give a buffet with so many things. Now, do you think that everyone will eat everything? No. But what does that show? If I have to hire you, it shows me that you have really worked on so many scenarios, and in that, what is the latest that is useful for me? Correct? So that's how, rather than saying it in percentage another way, we will take up these in such a way that this is what you would have done in the last couple of years, plus what is the latest problems what you are seeing in the market. So go with an experience in that level. What will happen? Whatever most of the companies or the interviewer wants, at will be covered, and sometimes it'll also be something latest. Because for example, I do some project for one of the client, or the project that I recently did, I'll put it as one of the use case and do it here. So few things might be a little advanced, but most of the things would be like, okay, from scratch, if you are implementing a project, or you're talking to a client and they have some requirement, you should be able to easily analyze what is their requirement with what you have done, correct? But again, the catch here is like, see, I cannot say, oh, take this and it will be fitting to every client. But with the problems what the client is going to give, and with all the best practices what we have learned, it should be easy for you to attack the problem and understand and give a solution, and then get into a little learning mode, like, okay, my client wants something more specific. With the first meeting you will be able to get a very clear clarity, and you can also tell them these are all the things you can do. And in the next meeting you can exactly nail the problem by saying, okay, for this and for your requirement, this is how I can tweak and tell you. So go with a problem solution which can fit into 2 or 3 ways, right? So that's the method or the focus what we wanted to do.
Got it, Adam. So one more question, right? So when these projects, right, any project, if we wanted to implement, we need the design, right? How about this design part? Is like, how are we getting? Is it like, is it helpful for solution architects also in future?
Exactly. So you're asking most of the questions. Unfortunately, I didn't tell it. I'll have another demo and I'll tell you. Because now, what is a project? Okay. A project is not something, I have a code in Terraform or Kubernetes and I run. You need to know why did you do it, correct? Now same example, let's say I'm telling you that you run Ansible and I used fork and serial. Now don't just blindly say that, oh, I used fork and serial. You design in such a way by saying, okay, my production has 10 machines, and in that 10 machines I wanted a high availability. So for that I need to make sure minimum 5 machines are running. So since this was the requirement from your client, you decided to set your fork or serial as 5 and the fork as 3, so that you can control. So this is how whatever the projects that we take, right, should be more on design. And again, just to add, I'll do CI/CD, I'll do Kubernetes, everything is there, but don't just jump. Because the projects, when we say we want to start from a conceptual wise, okay, think from the use case, and for this, how will the design look like, how will your architecture look like, and what and all the concepts that you need to use, and then say that you have started your development, because this is how the requirement gathering comes. So the project is exactly the same way what we wanted to do, but the only difference is we have all the code ready, but we will inject the details in such a way that you should be able to tell. Because if I do a project in 4 hours and I want you to say the same project took 4 months for you, is only when you say, I started with my design by gathering the requirement, and based on that I set up an architecture. Again, don't think architecture means it's only for Terraform. There is a design which you have to put for almost every tool. So we will get into it. And with that, how did you develop your code for Terraform or Kubernetes or Docker or whatever the things that you want? And how did you implement and run? So that's where there are 3, 4 phases: gathering requirement, designing it, and based on the design, how do you develop and put the architecture? And the last point is, how do you execute them? So, which is what I was just kind of talking today as an example of Ansible. So, you need to have all the 5 things as a DevOps engineer. You develop the code, and at the same time, you know how to run it.
And one last question. So I see most of you batches actually starts in the morning only, but do we have any weekend batches that you are planning to start? Because weekend would have a more time, so that we can take the course and then we can also implement. I'm just asking if any, if is there any possibility.
Nagesh, why are you asking all the right questions? Because this is the reason why we wanted to do the DevOps projects only on weekend. Okay, so if you're a regular person and you want to learn from scratch, you need more time, and every day you should learn. Which is why we generally keep our DevOps training, that's a DevOps ninjas, on weekdays. But coming back to the same. Now, if you are someone who are looking in project, 2 days we will train, and in this 2 days also we will have a lot of workshops. You can sit in the classroom and work out, but you need more time to go back, practice, come back and ask questions and prepare your resume, right? So for that, this project is going to be completely on weekend. Okay, so that's how we are going to classify. But yeah, feel free to ping me or Arjun. I can help you later with the questions, but in general, anything else specific I can help you answer.
No, no. Thanks, thanks. It was clarified so much. Really, thanks for clarifying them.
Sure. And just for the sake benefit of for others, I'll have a plan of session again because a couple of people are already asking. Now we saw some production clusters. How do we take? So let's say Terraform. How do we really use Terraform in the same method, right? Let's take up another webinar. We will do so. I'll have few more webinars planned in order to just make sure you subscribe the channel and you get the notification.
Adam, I have one question. Is there any possible to previous record? I will pay many money also because for me, I don't have time to spend to attend the class because of I'm working. My working hour is like that. Is there any possible? I will pay money also. Is there any possible that that kind of thing?
Okay, Arun, it's not about just money. The factor why we wanted to
Ah,
spend more
yes,
time
yes.
is understand. So I'll do one thing. Maybe can you ping any one of us in the team or Arjun in the number? Let's see what we can do to help you.
Yeah, yes, yes, sure, sure.
Hello, Adam. Good morning.
Yeah,
This Ashwin here.
yeah, sure.
Are you able to hear me? Yeah.
I can hear
See,
you.
but yeah, I attended the DevOps Ninja program means last year.
Okay.
Okay, and but now this project related work I want to join. Means we can like how long? What is the duration of this course? Means is there any syllabus that what in this pattern we are going to cover? In DevOps Ninja, we got a syllabus, right? The same way, will we get a syllabus for this in projects also? What all things will be covered?
Yeah, definitely. I'll do again one thing. This is something which we just wanted to introduce, so that's the reason most of the people we are inviting. So we'll send you out the curriculum, and we'll also have a couple of career guidance, and yeah, you call it as demo or whatever. So we'll get a little deeper into understanding what, because see, from a very high level, it again looks like the same Terraform tool, same Kubernetes, right? But what are we exactly going to do in it? So that's what it is. So I can give you the curriculum, but since you have been already trained, you would understand. We cannot just put everything as a 10-page sessions and give it to you. But I'll give you a curriculum, but definitely I'll have another demo session in which we'll talk more about how do we run, what is this projects, right? What kind of scenarios? And again, definitely to the point is it's not just projects, it's going to be on the four factors from design, requirement gathering, put into the architecture, develop, and implementation. So these are the five areas that we will look at. And again, it's the same set of tools with more production scenarios that we see.
Okay, thank you, Adam. So when this batch will start and when the enrollment will happen?
Again, that's a good question. We just started probably, that's what we are in time. It might take another 3 weeks or so, probably by May first week or something, we can get started. I'll keep you posted on those details, but feel free to ping Arjun and I'll get back to you on those details.
Thank you.
Hi, Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I have a question related to this boot camp. So, you said if we, I am working from last 5 years, so I explore with some of the tools, but not, right, the corporate companies restricted related to specific tools. So, how you handle the project? That means which is not covered in organization. We are not using as a person.
That's the main intention of why we wanted to do. So the intention here is if I hire, okay, how is that I put this course is like if I'm going to hire a person who has a relevant experience of 6 years or 5 years. I'm not talking about the
Okay.
overall, right? So what and all is the
Okay.
expectation? So if you know in the market, they'll ask you, you're familiar with CI/CD. They'll ask
Yes.
you, have you provisioned the infrastructure? And for that, have you used tools like Terraform, Ansible? And it's not just doing the CI/CD with a tool like Jenkins, but have you also set up the deployments? And once again, it is not just about creating Kubernetes, but have you also set up the cluster and monitor
Hmm.
on a very high level? And how do you secure all of them, which is DevSecOps? So as a DevOps or a SRE engineer, regardless of how many years, you will now have to talk to them by saying you have experience on all these areas, which is where
Yes.
you need to kind of showcase that you have used Terraform and Ansible to configure different machines in a cloud like AWS. That could be for dev, QA, or production. And you have also used tools like Jenkins, Docker, Kubernetes, monitoring, and DevSecOps, all these things, right? But how are you going to tell, right? And that's where
Hmm.
you have to tell, once again, it's not on just running. I'll tell you the simple magic or the difference between how you can take the 3x salary and 2x salary is not just telling the concept, but to tell how you have worked. So how can you say that the same Kubernetes you have worked in 4 years? So you need to first tell you have developed things on Kubernetes, for example, and you have also managed the Kubernetes administration. And day to day, you also do some upgrades, patching, monitoring. So this is how, whether you have been working for a single client or two, three clients in the last 4 years, you have been using tools like Docker or Kubernetes for different scenarios. So that's the level that we want to take up by saying that it's not a project where you just take and just directly apply. Definitely you can do, but you have a high potential where you can just change a little bit and say, this is what I did for one client and this is what I did for another client. And that is how, from the last 4 years, if you are saying that
Hmm.
you're going to use Kubernetes, you have exposure on the development, you have exposure on the administration, and you also have the exposure on the maintenance and monitoring part. So that is how, let me just stop by saying another word. These are all the things there, but what is some more new? So you can also say, you know what, my company is moving to some concepts like MLOps or a little more advanced of AI. So what is some of the things that have started to do POC? So that is where you conclude by saying what you have already worked, what you did recently, and what you are planning to do for the next 3 months or 6 months. So that makes you, if someone answers me, I can 100% get convinced that yes, this guy has genuinely worked because he's talking about his past, he's talking about his current, and he's also saying what he's doing. Now, this is what most of the people will not be doing. Why? Oh, I have used Kubernetes, I run YAML file. Now that is a pure indication that you're just operation guy, you did something and you came back. But the method that I'm telling is try to cover your overall and also showcase that, hey, I'm a real-time guy where this is what the next problem my client gave and right now I'm working on that. So that leaves a very good impression and go back and whatever the salary you want, you'll be able to get.
Yeah. Actually, my question is related to interview is fine, but my question is in terms of this Ninja program, you said you will train for 35 real-time projects, right? So, for example, I don't have a knowledge on Argo CD. It's a new tool to me. In that case, how you will explain as a beginner how that thing I want to know actually.
Exactly. So that's the whole concept where what you need to learn from the scratch related the tool, because this is where I'm trying to give you the opportunity to try to understand. See, DevOps is very vast. You cannot learn everything in 2 months. That is
Yes.
definitely there. But we are dividing it in such a way, if you know concepts about Kubernetes, you know concepts about CI/CD to some extent. The only thing is you don't know what is advanced thing. Then
Hmm.
join the projects bootcamp where we will start, because like I said, I don't want you to just say, oh, let me show you GitOps and work on this on some tool, but you should be telling why did you introduce GitOps? So what was the problem? And to solve the problem, what is GitOps doing? And in that, what exactly you did. So that's the level that I said user gather requirements and then implement. But unfortunately, if
Oh,
you say, I don't even know what is CI/CD or I have just used Jenkins, then I will suggest please learn first what is Kubernetes, what are the
hmm.
YAML file concepts, and what is Jenkins, and then come to the project. So the difference, you have to choose whether you are familiar with the tools, and whatever the concepts and projects is only what you need, then get into the projects program. But if you are not familiar and you have time and you want to learn everything from scratch, then we recommend to go through your DevOps Ninjas program, which is more from the beginner to advanced level. Getting it?
Oh, yeah. When we can expect this curriculum for this boot camp?
We will share it as soon as possible. Feel free to ping us in the number. Or Arjun, I think, can you drop the number in the chat? Team can get back.
Yeah, thanks.
Uh, Hi Adam, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, can you explain what is idempotency?
Okay. Idempotency is a concept, okay, which Terraform or Kubernetes or even Ansible uses, but it's a very old word. The modern word for that is convergence. See, idempotency is very simple. You have a desired state and you have an actual state. So most of the tools like Kubernetes, Ansible, Terraform works in it. So what do you mean by that? Now, for this, let me take an example of Terraform or Ansible, whichever you want. So you wanted something is what we call it as desired state. And you give it through YAML file or configuration file, TF file. Now, what is actually there in the machine or the cluster is called as actual state. Okay. So when you run a tool like Terraform or Kubernetes, if what you wanted and you have defined in this YAML file or the config file is already available on the machine, then the tool should not do anything, correct? It should simply say, hey, what you wanted is there. But what you wanted is not there on the machine, then if you run, tool will say there is a difference because you wanted something that is not there. Only then it will go to that machine or the infrastructure and it updates. So that concept where only when there is a change or only when what you wanted is not there, the tool will do. So that concept is called as idempotency or convergence. If everything is same, tool should not do anything. Like you run Terraform, it will clearly say nothing to do because your infra is matching, right? Same thing you run Kubernetes, it will say you wanted two pods is already there, but it is not there, it will go and update, right? So that concept where it updates only when it is not there is called as idempotency.
Okay, so it will not repeat the things which is already available, right?
Even if you try, it will not, it shouldn't do. That's the whole concept of actual
Okay.
state, or what we call it as desired and actual state.
So one more question. So there are other tools comparing to Ansible, right? So why should we use Ansible comparing to other tools like there's a Chef, Puppet as well?
Okay,
So
that's a good question. So which phone do you have?
sorry,
Which phone do you have?
uh, I have a Android phone.
Okay, and any other phone? So why don't you go in with your previous old phones? Or now, if I give you a chance to pick up a phone, which phone will you take?
Obviously,
Smartphone,
latest. Yeah,
correct? Why? Why latest?
because a lot of features are available, right?
Exactly. So Chef, Puppet, all these tools are there, but that was only when we didn't have a lot of concepts earlier. Probably I would say around 8 or 10 years back. But with the modern improvements, first thing is it should be easy to learn, okay, and it should be easy to run also. What is happening nowadays? DevOps is also getting changed into platform. The difference is you are not going to be just a DevOps engineer only for one product. You are going to be like a platform engineer for the entire organization. Then what will happen? You develop the code and you give the code to someone and they have to run. Being the case, if there is any small changes, how easy it is for them to learn and modify. And that's one of the reason why Ansible is popular. And not only that, it's lesser in terms of maintenance and headache. Now, I'm not going into the complete details, but definitely if you go through channel, I think I have a lot of other videos. But you can compare and read is when you start setting up your infrastructure using Puppet or Chef, you have to set up the concept called server and client, and you have to install a lot of that. So there's a lot of maintenance overhead you will take. So this is why Ansible is easy because it's built on top of Python. So you don't have to learn Python, and it's very easy to run, and it's easy to set up and maintain. And internally it uses SSH, so there is lesser complication in trying to set up. And I can use it only for configuring, and I can control how I want to. So these are the features which you do not have. Just like I said, people still use old phones because they are convenient and they don't want to upgrade because of cost or anything. Same way, there are few companies people will use, but given a chance, you should always go with modern. Why? Because it is cost effective and it is going to help you to do a lot of automation in a better way. Okay, so that's the reason most of the industry people prefer Ansible for configuring the server.
Okay, thanks, Adam. And like what percentage of companies are using? Means almost every company is using it, or like how?
It depends. I cannot really say that, but as far as I've seen, I would say more than 80% have moved. Like example of phone, you compare and you say this answer in India, how many are using Android phone? I know I cannot tell exact, but I know most of them use. But still, some of people prefer old phone because of whatever reason, right? But forget about others. Now, this is where I would say the question in a different way. If you want to buy a phone, which one you will buy, right? Or if a company is giving you a phone for doing some production support, what phone you will prefer? The same thing is now you should ask, okay, you want to learn and you want to adapt because when you go as a senior or an expert and tell someone that, hey, I know all these concepts, which tool you should be learning? Always take the latest, which is more popular.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
Thanks a lot, guys. Anyway, any last questions?
Hi, Adam. Last question. These projects, right? Are we going to use the SRE kind of like on the SRE side also?
Yes, both. Again, don't get confused. It's just, I mean, it's industry stuff where they're just giving a different name, but eventually you will end up doing both. The only thing what you need to know is how market has become. DevOps means they focus only on operations. Okay. So the same team, if someone wants to develop Terraform code, Kubernetes code, and manage those, then they started calling them as SRE. So that's the only difference. So definitely point is not just to run and show how to do, but you should also know how that you developed and what requirements. So from that angle and security, we'll be focusing on all the three areas. So DevSecOps, DevOps, and SRE. So yeah, you can kind of use it to apply with just a little tweak here and there on how to tell that right. You can apply.
Hi Adam.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a professional career gap. So how can I convince the interviewers that I'm relevant to the latest skills, the DevOps?
How many years of gap you have?
Around 1.5 year.
Okay, maybe I would like to talk a little deeper, so feel free to call Arjun or myself, we can talk. But on a high level, I can just suggest one thing is, well, you can take some experience from some consultancy and whatever the projects we are doing here, you can say that. If not, there's another method which you can tell due to personal reasons you were not able to work full time, but you were doing some kind of contract and in Wezva technology you were intern in kind of learning all these. So that way you can still say you were hands-on implementing some projects as an intern with us and take that experience and show. But again, it goes back to the question is you have to wait because some companies might take it directly because if you are okay with a little lesser salary, you will get immediately. But some companies might ask more details. So that's where we need to kind of look into your profile and apply. So there's two ways, like I said. Safer side, put it
Mhm.
as a internship and say I was not just sitting idle, but I was preparing and I was doing some projects for some client, and again as an intern. Or you were directly associated with some client through some consultancy as a contractor. So that is another safest method that you can take, and whatever the projects that we are doing, you can kind of showcase the same.
So internship means I can like put it like a freelancing.
It's up to you. How do you say? Because see, I cannot say that from WezvaTech you did that, because the moment when you say freelancing, if it is cost involved, well, we cannot give it, right? But what we can give you is okay. You've been associated in terms of only learning, and as part of the learning, I gave you some clients where you did some small projects, and that's how you covered
Mhm.
your 1.5 years. That is possible. But if you want to put it as freelancing, then you have to say through a consultancy, you got this opportunity, and that is how the consultancy sent you to a particular client and you did that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Okay.